Hey there, kids in DVD land. It's Mike Portnoy. June 20th, 2001, coming to you from New York City. And I'm here to do this audio commentary track, and I'm going to watch the Liquid Drum Theater videos with you. 2 instructional videos, which I'm very proud of, and I'm actually looking forward to watching this. I haven't seen these videos in quite some time, at least a year or so this is going to be pretty fresh to me. And as you know, the focus of this first volume is on the music of Liquid Tension Experiment, so it's going to be a nice trip down memory lane for myself as well. And you're hearing the music to Acid Rain, which is a high-speed double bass frenzy frantic piece of music. And this footage right here, all of this kind of studio footage was shot at Millbrook Studios, where we did the album, which of course I'll talk about later. And then there's Rob Wallace and Paul Siegel, who I must give props up to. They and Phil as well. All 3 of these guys did an amazing job with this video. And it's really a lot of cool cuts on here, a lot of information, a lot of music, and I've said it before, I'll say it again. I think you could watch both of these videos, and it's not only educational, but I think it's very entertaining as well. So it's kind of concert, studio, and instructional all put together. And Rob, Paul, and Phil all did a great job in bringing my ideas and visions to life. Anyway, I'm not going to be speaking during the sections in the video where I'm speaking on tape, obviously, so when those moments arise, you'll actually hear what I'm saying on video. So I'm only going to speak during these musical passages. As if you're not getting enough speaking by itself as it is, you're going to actually get a full 3-hour talkathon now. But anyway, playing Acid Rain, the writing and recording of the song was just a real fast thing. We put it together kind of in one afternoon, and it was just a frantic, go as fast as you can. And the kind of pace of the song feels exactly the way it was to write it. It was just really crazy. And this is the ending of that segment now. I think we're about to go into the wonderful world of Liquid Drum Theater. Take it away, Mike. The Mike of 1999. I'll pass it over to you. Hello, everybody. Mike Portnoy here. It's raining on the streets of New York City, as a song once said. Anyway, the origins of Liquid Tension Experiment, I suppose, goes back to where my relationship with Magna Carta Records began, and Pete Morticelli and Mike Varney over at the label. And my relationship with them began in 1996, I believe, when they called me to participate in the Rush tribute album that they were doing, Working Man. And that session was the first time that any Dream Theater members had sort of left the family for an outside environment and to do an outside session. But in any case, that session was really great for me because I worked with Billy Sheehan, and Billy and I spent almost a week together in San Francisco, working out the tracks, playing together, getting to know each other, and you know, messing with the arrangements of the songs for the tribute album. So in any case, that was a great experience, and it was a lot of fun to work outside of the normal confines of Dream Theater, which I had become so accustomed to for 10 years at that point. After working on that project with Billy, the Magna Carta guys came back to me and said, well, how'd you like to do something else? And they offered me the opportunity to put together a project with the players of my choice, and basically asked me for a wish list of all the different players I'd like to work with. And after months and months of phone calls and certain people being available and certain people not being available and aligning different schedules, finally, towards the end of 1997, to make a long story short, we found ourselves set up and ready to go with the lineup of myself, the great Tony Levin on bass, who I had always wanted to work with, always admired all of his work
obviously with Peter Gabriel and King Crimson, but then also the stuff he did with Pink Floyd and Yes and John Lennon and Paul Simon. Obviously he had the experience to really play with anybody. On keyboards, I chose Jordan Rudess, who to me is the most amazing talent to have ever touched a keyboard. He's just an absolute, total, intense prodigy. He was admitted to Juilliard at the age of 9, so it gives you an idea of the type of player he is. After going through a big list of guitar players and none of them ever quite panning out, my wife actually suggested to me to consider using John in this project. And at first I wanted to keep the project completely separate from Dream Theater, but on second thought it really made a lot of sense because John and I have had such a long history together and such a writing chemistry that we figured it would really enhance this outside project, and ultimately it really did. So I'm really glad that John ended up coming on board. So the project kind of started almost as a solo project of mine, but it was obvious the minute that we started collaborating that it was going to become a full collaborative band type project, and that's exactly what happened. And once we hit the studio, we had 1 week to create music that was intense, eclectic, instrumental, and always exciting. So it was a great experience. Well, here we are in beautiful Millbrook, New York, upstate New York, at Millbrook Sound Studios, and this is the place where we made Liquid Tension Experiment 1 and 2. So let me take you inside to take a look at the studio and see where the magic and mayhem all took place. Come on in. Okay, we're going to do some time travel here. This footage right here was in '99. Then we cut here to 97, and of course this audio commentary is 2001, so we have 3 different worlds colliding. Marty McFly would be proud of me. Anyway, what you're seeing here is me entering the studio one morning with camera in hand. So you're actually witnessing us saying good morning to each other, and Jordan and Tony obviously got there before me, because I'm the late sleeper. Okay. But you're going to hear these guys present to me. This is the actual Osmosis theme being presented to me for the very first time. So this is like, you know, me hearing it for the very first time. It's something that Jordan and Tony were jamming on one morning, waiting for me and John. And this obviously turned into Osmosis. It was great in the LTE sessions because, you know, we spent a lot of time writing songs, but then anytime we fell upon a little groove or a theme or something like this, you know, we would just roll tape and turn it into some sort of improv thing. And it was a really great way to write. Here's Bongo. Here's my dog Bongo. And she was with me for some of the LTE album, and she was with me for Transatlantic and Dream Theater recording. She's a real studio dog. She's been to Electric Ladyland and Avatar and Millbrook. And the idea behind the music was anyway. Take it away, Mike. Music. We were going to try to be very technical, try to be very progressive, but at the same time be very melodic. And most importantly, be very spontaneous. There were portions of the recording process that were completely improvised, very jam-oriented things, and then there were, you know, several songs that were written, but even those songs were very spontaneous. This is the writing process. Normally in a Dream Theater context, this writing process will last days, weeks, sometimes months. Here we are reduced to mere minutes and hours. So we have to be creative and quick. You sure said it, Mike. That is true. This is, you're witnessing the creation of Kindred Spirits. I think this was the first real heavy-duty Jordan influence in the sessions, because the first thing we worked on was Paradigm Shift, and I think John and I kind of, I mean, obviously I'm not downplaying Jordan's influence, obviously everything was totally collaborated on, but Paradigm Shift was definitely very drum and guitar driven. Kindred Spirits had a more keyboard-driven background, and reminded me a lot of the Dixie Dregs and Steve Morse Band, and you know, Jordan has that background, having played with the Dregs for a little while. We're all trying to put together one riff
that leads into solos. Anyway, there's the
The
chart.
entire project was a lot of fun, and
Thank you.
I'm going to spend some time now playing through a lot of the tracks from both the first Liquid Tension and the second Liquid Tension albums. And here we go. Let's make our way into the drum room. Well, here we are in the drum room at Millbrook Studios, and this is where all the magic, all of the writing and recording for both Liquid Tension albums were done. And as you can see, I have a much smaller kit here than what I usually play with Dream Theater. And the main reason for that, to be completely honest, is that when the Liquid Tension 1 session was booked, Dream Theater had just finished some shows in Brazil, and my big kit was still being shipped. So I needed to put together an alternate kit to use in the studio. And actually, I'm really glad that I went with a different kit as opposed to my usual Dream Theater kit, because it gave me a whole fresh perspective on creating parts and the writing process. Let me tell you a little bit about this setup. As you can see, it's one bass drum, which was very different for me, and it has a much different feel playing one bass drum than playing two kicks. And for 10, 15 years, however long it's been, I've always played with two bass drums. So it was a little bit of a different approach for me to get used to the feel of double kick on one bass drum. And I kind of adapted pretty quickly, and I was able to do a lot of the things that I usually do with Dream Theater on the two bass drums. And what I did here was I actually, because I had half of the big drum set, I actually was left with only a couple toms. So I added a set of timbalitos and used those as my two high toms. So I actually have a set of timbalitos, a 12-inch rack tom, I believe it's a 14-inch floor tom, and an 18-inch floor tom. And this was also the first time I was able to set up a kit with floor toms on both my left and right. And it gave me some pretty cool possibilities with coming up with some of the parts. One thing I had to adjust to when playing a smaller setup with a single bass drum was the way that the drums were angled. And what I did was I've spent so many years playing a double bass setup where I have the snare in the center, and then my two kick drums, and then the toms revolving around it to create some sort of symmetrical setup. It's kind of a little asymmetrical when you're playing with one bass drum because you're kind of angled a certain way. So what I did was I actually set it up as if it was a double bass drum. So with my left pedal, I actually positioned it as if there was another bass drum here to my left, and I put the snare in the center, and I based the toms around it as if I was playing a double bass setup, but with only one bass drum. So my main kick is actually angled out. Okay, once I decided on the drum configuration, I had to gather a set of cymbals, and of course, I have a wide variety of Sabian cymbals here with me, and even though the drum configuration was scaled down, I did use a lot of cymbals as well because I like to have that variety in cymbal land. So as you can see, there's a wide variety, and there's a bunch of my new custom cymbals on this setup. These exact custom creations were used on both Liquid Tension albums. So this setup was there for both of those albums, but since then I have adapted it to the cymbal line that I'm going to be putting out with Sabian in the year 2000. And it's the Sabian Max line, and that consists of a 7-inch splash, a 9-inch splash, an 11-inch splash. And on this kit, I have 2 of the 3 sets of Max Staxes that we're going to have. And here's the low set, which is a 12 China and a 14 crash, and a 10 China and a 10 crash. So that's a low Stax, and this is a medium Stax. And then in terms of crashes, I have a 16, a 17, and a 19, and 1 China, and 1 ride, which is my 22-inch HH Rock ride, which is used on both kits, the Dream Theater kit and the Liquid Tension kit, and a set of 13-inch hats as opposed to 14s, which I use with Dream Theater, and a bell. Anyway, that's the setup that we have here, and it was a real nice change of pace for me to be playing on a smaller kit. The first taste I had of scaling down
was on the Falling Into Infinity album when I actually had 2 drum sets set up in the studio. And we did that album a few months before the Liquid Tension 1 session. And I enjoyed myself so much on the small kit that it was really nice to be able to play some real progressive parts on a kit of this size. And I'm really glad that I did it, because it gave me a whole fresh perspective as opposed to just playing, on the usual Dream Theater environment. So I was able to apply myself kind of differently. Well, this is where it all began. In this room, behind this kit, this is where we first gathered and began the Liquid Tension experiment in the fall of '97. And we knew we wanted to come right out of the bag with something that was going to slap you in the face and tell you that we weren't messing around. So the very first thing we wrote was Paradigm Shift. And it's the very first thing you hear on the album, and I guess it was everybody's very first taste of the Liquid Tension experiment. So I'm going to play a bit of that for you now, and then I'll come back and break some of it down for you.
1, 2, 3, 4. Boy, that guy can talk. Well, now I guess I got to talk. Paradigm Shift. To me, this, when I think of LTE, for some reason, I think of this song. And, in '98, on the Dream Theater tour, me and John broke into this during his solo. Then in 2000, Dream Theater ended up playing a bit of this live. And then this summer, me and John are doing the G3 tour, and we're going to be performing this at that as well. So this is kind of like the LTE, staple, I suppose. It's the song that I kind of identify, maybe just because it's the first song in the first album. But anyway, as you can see by my chicken legs there, there's a lot of double bass going on here. And this is the first track I ever recorded with one bass drum and a double pedal. And considering there's a lot of double bass drumming in this song, it was something that I had to immediately adapt to. But I got used to it, and since then I've done both LTE albums with one kick drum, and both Transatlantic albums with one kick drum, and now I'm doing the G3 tour with one kick drum. So anyway, you see me using the 2 floor toms. Having a floor tom on the left was a nice change of pace for me with this project. There's the feet going again. I don't have those sneakers any longer. I think somebody bought them on eBay for I think $350 or something like that. Joking. As you could also see, I'm using Iron Cobra pedals, and I've been asked a lot about that because I also endorse DW pedals, but for some reason through the years I haven't been exclusively playing them. And I kind of switch back and forth. It seems on the big Dream Theater kit I use the DW pedals, but all these little projects and stuff I've been using the Iron Cobras, which are also great pedals. So I really love them both. And Songs of Our Times. I'm just taking it. Not much more to say about this. It's kind of self-explanatory. And meanwhile, I'm about to break it down in detail. So.
Okay, the most immediate thing that jumps out and grabs you right by the throat is that opening bit. And not to pat myself on the back, but that was something that I had, and it was revolved around a drum pattern. And basically, when we got together to write the song, we had the idea of coming out full guns blazing. So there was no better way than just to have this completely sick unison thing. So I had this pattern, probably just came up with it on the spot, I'm sure. And then those guys, as incredible as they are, just completely doubled it, with ease. So let me break down that pattern for you right now. Okay, the pattern, like so many of these patterns that I play, is broken up between the snare and the kick drums. And I'll cut this into 2 pieces. The first piece is a pattern that happens 3 times. And it's 1, 2, 1, 2, 6, and 2. So that's 2 on the snare, 2 on the kicks, 6 on the snare, 2 on the kicks. Let me play that for you. 3, 4. You put them together and they sound like this. Okay, now the second half of this is a pattern of 6 on the snare, 2 on the kick drum, then 6 on the first timbali, 6 on the second timbali, and then 4 on the snare. So let me play that now for you. Now, let me put the two together. So we're going to have the first half and the second half put together, and there you have the opening to Paradigm Shift. I'll play at normal speed, and then I'll slow it down, then bring it back up to speed. 1, 2, 3, 4.
This was some cool footage of Tony laying down the ending of the guitar solo with his famous, what do they call it? Funk fingers, I think they're called. I remember me and John Petrucci and John Mayall went and saw Anderson, Bruford, Wakeman Howe in '89 with Tony playing, and we had never seen those funk fingers before. And I think John actually thought that those were his real fingers, like he was E.T. or something.
What I'd like to do is, before I get too
Anyway.
into all of the parts I'm going to break down, I would like to just open up my toolbox or my bag of tricks and give you a brief layout of the sort of fills that I like to use a lot. And you'll notice them throughout all of my records, all the songs I play. Whenever I'm looking for a fill, a lot of them are developed around these patterns which I have, which are patterns between the hands and the feet in groups of 2s, 4s, and 6s, sometimes even 8s. And basically they sound like this.
Show off.
Now, if I was to slow that, when you play him up to speed, it sounds like Fred Flintstone starting his car after a binge at the bowling alley. But anyway, when you slow them down, what they are actual just patterns of 2s, 4s, 6s, and you could break them up any way you'd like. The easiest way to start to get comfortable with them is to do them just on the snare and the kick drums. So, for instance, a 2 and 2 pattern would sound like this. A 4 and 2 pattern would sound like a 6 and 2 pattern would sound like So anyway, these are 3 variations amongst many which I utilize all the time. So throughout this video, you'll see me talking about them, breaking them down. But I just wanted you to become aware of them because it is a big part of my style and a big part of my fills. And once I started developing some of these type of ideas on the drums, I would just come up with different patterns. I would do a 2 and a 2 and a 4 and a 2, or a 4 and a 2 and a 6 and a 2, and then I would maybe break up the snare and the tom. You know, if I was doing a 4 and a 2 rather than just doing 4 on the snare, I would go maybe snare, tom, kick, kick. You breaking them up around the toms. You could do all sorts of different combinations, and it's a matter of just experimenting and getting comfortable with the patterns. So anyway, this is a big part of my toolbox and my bag of tricks that you should be made aware of before we get any further into some of these riffs and parts. One of my favorite moments on the second Liquid Tension album is the 17-minute extravaganza, When the Water Breaks. And working in the format of a very long song, to me, is always the most rewarding because you could throw in so many different ideas and styles and kind of just go for it and throw everything but the kitchen sink in. And this song was definitely one of those types of songs. And I'm going to actually play through a portion of that song right now. And the portion that I'm going to play through right now begins with a bit of a drum solo. And like I've said, what I played on the album, so much of it was spontaneously created that it's hard for me to go back and remember exactly what I did because so much of it was on the spot. So the drum solos in this particular section of When the Water Breaks were completely improvised. So I don't think I'd be able to ever reproduce them properly right now. So what I'm going to do is actually just go for it again and improvise again. And what we did when creating this part was Tony Levin just laid down a solid ostinato pattern on the bass, and it was in 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, or you can count it in threes. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. In any case, he laid that down a solid foundation, and I just went completely out and went berserk on top of it. So I'm going to start off with that piece with the improv drum solos, and then it's going to move further into the song for a few minutes so you can get a taste of what was going on in that piece.
So as I said, I'm about to improvise this, as I did with the original studio version. Those are Max Splashes and Max Stacks, currently available at your local retail store. Make sure to ask for them by name. I'm about to utilize some of those patterns that I had just talked about between the snare and the kick drums and the toms. You know, when laying this down, I kind of just concentrate on the click. Here's those patterns. Kind of just concentrated on the click and, Tony's bass pattern, and kind of just let myself go and just fly around it. Not even necessarily always landing on the one, even, as long as... I find that when using a click in the studio, I find it incredibly comforting. It gives me a lot more independence because I no longer have to worry about the time and concentrate on keeping the time and the pulse because it's being kept for me. So it gives me a tremendous amount of freedom and independence to just kind of play around it, knowing that the time and the pulse is going to always be there. So, I'm not afraid of metronomes and click tracks. I actually really think that there's something that can really help your playing in the studio, and I really enjoy them. Right there I'm doing a pattern, ride and hi-hat pattern, which I think the first time I ever saw that used was Neil Peart in Subdivisions. And of course, I use it a lot now. John's rocking out right now. It's been a long time since I've analyzed his time signatures, so let me see if I can catch him in this spot. Okay, 7 and 6, I believe. But don't quote me. But of course you will. Right now, somebody's writing on the internet, "Hey, Mike screwed up. He counted it wrong." I don't know. It's been so long. I was prepared when I did the original video in '99. Jordan, going for it. I think When the Water Breaks, really, I said earlier that Paradigm Shift is kind of the LTE staple. When I think of LTE, I think of that song. But I really think When the Water Breaks is actually the quintessential composed LTE song. I think 3 Minute Warning, the improv, is really an incredible piece of music, but that was improvised. So I think as far as composition goes, I think this track really has it all. You know, within this 16 or 17 minutes, we kind of covered so much ground. You know, odd time signatures, grooves, jams. Here you're hearing some great unison playing between John and Jordan. And anyway, so I think this song really has it all. If there was only one LTE song I could play for somebody, assuming that they would be willing to sit down for 17 minutes and listen to it, this would be the track. You can see the sweat accumulating on my tank top there.
Okay, after the big build with the improvised drum solos, I kick into a groove which is actually broken up into 7/8 and 5/8. The rest of the band is continuing with the ostinato that Tony Levin laid down underneath the solos, which was in 6. 1 2 3 4 5 6. 1 2 3 4 5 6. So after playing solos over 6, when I finally joined back up with the band, rather than joining in a 6 pattern, I tried to make it interesting and played a different subdivision from the rest of the band. So while they continued in 6/4, I broke the pattern up into 1/8 notes. So 6/4 or 6 quarter notes would be equivalent to 12 1/8 notes. So what I did was came up with a way to play a subdivision with 1/8 notes equaling 12 1/8 notes to equal their 6 quarter notes. Anyway, so what I did was this pattern was 7/8 and 5/8. And if you add up the 7 and the 5, that gives you 12. And there are your 12 1/8 notes. So that would be counted 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 1 2 3 4 5 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 1 2 3 4 5 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 1 2 3 4 5 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 1 2 3 4 5 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 1 2 3 4 5. Another thing I like to do is I like to take a particular groove, and then rather than continuing to play it one way, I'll start to phrase it differently around the drums, or maybe use different instruments to bring the groove out. So that groove in 7/8 and 5/8, after I played it 8 times through or whatever it was, then I actually switched the groove up a little bit and started to use different cymbals to play those accents. So I played the same pattern, but then I went to more of an open hi-hat using the medium stack right here to play the same pattern in 7/8 and 5/8. So let me play that for you now.
One, two, three, four, five, six, seven. 1 2 3 4 5. 1 2 3 4 5 6 7. 1 2 3 4 5. 1 2 3 4 5 6 7. 1 2 3 4 5.
Okay, the last thing that I would like to break down from this excerpt of When the Water Breaks is the drum fill that closes out the section. And once again, this is taken from my traditional bag of tricks, and it utilizes a pattern similar to the one I broke down earlier, based around patterns with the hands and the feet, snare, kick drum, and the toms, and so on. So I'm going to break this down for you. What happened was, if my memory serves me correctly, I believe either Jordan or John were playing this thing on top. This whole pattern on top while we were grooving. We were playing a thing in 7, and they had this strange syncopated pattern on top while we were in 7, and then we decided to end the section with me actually joining in with the pattern and then closing it out. So let me break that pattern down for you. What's going on there? Instead of playing the pattern like I did earlier, solely on the snare and the kick drums, I'm actually breaking the top part up between my snare and left floor tom. So rather than just doing 2 hits on the snare, I'm going right left between the snare and the left floor tom. So the pattern that is starting here, it's 4 sets of 2 and 2, and then 2 and 4. And the 2s on top are always right left, meaning snare and floor tom, and then 2 with the kicks, right left on top again, and then 4 with the kicks. So let me play that for you, and this happens 4 times. 1 2, 3. So that's the first half of the pattern, and it does that 4 times. 2 and 2, 2 and 4. Then the ending of the fill is 4 on the snare, 2 with the kick. 4 on the right floor tom, 2 with the kick. 2 toms, 2 snares, cymbal choke. So, once again, 4 on the snare, 2 with the kick. 4 on the floor tom, 2 with the kick, 2 toms, 2 snares, cymbal choke. So let me play that for you now. Now, I'll put the 2 phrases together. So we'll start with the first phrase, and it'll be directly connected to the second phrase. And I'll start with the whole pattern at normal speed, and then I'll slow it down and bring it back up. By Accident. This is a track off the second LPE album, and like I was saying earlier with Kindred Spirits, being keyboard driven, this is very keyboard driven as well, piano driven actually. It's something that Jordan brought in, and then we developed it as a band once he put it in. This lovely footage, this is my actual chart for By Accident. As you can see, the working title was the Not So Latin Anymore tune. It started as the Latin tune, and once I started playing it was Not So Latin Anymore. But this was the showing this chart was the alternative to showing me sitting behind the drums right now, picking my nose, waiting to play. So instead you get this nice behind-the-scenes studio footage. I think this is 7, 7, 7, and 4. 4, 7, 7, and 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4. So 3 bars to 7 and 1 of 8. And adding the tambourine in there. This is the only track on this video that we show the performance in its entirety. For contractual reasons, but we won't go there. I would have liked to have shown more, but I chose to show this one in its entirety because, I don't know, it just seemed so different than any of the typical Dream Theater heavy metal approaches. This is a nice odd twist right there. Geez, I haven't counted it in years, but I think it's a bar of something 16. But it's been a while since I counted it, so I'm not going to embarrass myself by putting the wrong odd time right there. But anyway, my joke about the Not So Latin Anymore thing, like I said, when Jordan brought it in, it was had a very definite Latin twist to it. Almost like a Michel Camilo, I guess, or a Santana sort of thing. And then as soon as I started playing it, turned into John Bonham playing with Santana. But, you know, there were moments where I was trying to cop like a Carter Beauford, Dave Matthews feel, you know, as much as I can. I mean, I'm the first to admit that I'm definitely a rock drummer. And, you know, I'm not a jazz drummer. I'm not a Latin drummer. I have a lot of admiration for those drummers and for those styles.
but I grew up listening to rock, heavy metal, and progressive rock. So, you know, that's my style, you know. But every once in a while, it is nice to play along with something like this where I can try different things to the best of my abilities. And here's when it, you know, open up into a 4/4 groove. So it's almost Alan White-like at times. Actually, this song, you know, like this is like the John Bonham playing with Santana riff. But there's also very Alan White type moments, you know, very Yes type moments in this song as well. Now this section coming up here, the guitar solo, almost reminds me of something that Fish would do. The band Fish, not the singer of Marillion, ex-singer of Marillion. Or P-Fish, as I like to call them. But it reminds me of something, the kind of vibe that they would have. There's an overdubbed timbali right there. You can hear another one right here. I like overdubbing percussion and drums. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. You know, a lot of times I'll see people discussing on the internet or will ask me about an overdub, and I'm not trying to cheat anybody. I'm not trying to pretend I'm playing more drums than I am. There's another overdub right there. It's just, you know, when singers sing, they'll do background vocals and do overdubs, and guitar players will do many different tracks of guitars. I don't see why it should be any different for the drums. And, you know, I like doing a lot of tambourine overdubs and shakers, and every once in a while, if I want to add a timbali, oh, did I miss it? If I want to do a timbali overdub, you know, for a song like this, then I don't think there's anything wrong with that. These little breaks are cool. Very Jordan stylistically. There's another hi-hat and ride combo, but I'm doing more of like a little twist in there. A lot of this does remind me of Carter Beauford, like I mentioned earlier, but more of a rockin' version. Back to the main theme from the beginning, the more upbeat rockin' mode. It's always important for me to develop the parts. In other words, if there's a section and an A section or a B section that repeats throughout the song, I want to try playing it different ways, different times. Like for instance, this is almost a variation of what I was counting out earlier, the 7-7-7-8 or 4/4. This is a variation of that time signature, but phrased completely differently. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, 2, 3, 4. Back to the intro theme that's stated at the very top of the song on the piano. The guitar joining in now. This is a really cool song, and it's amazing to me that we wrote these songs so quickly. Almost every single LTE composition, with the exception of When the Water Breaks, was written, you know, in one afternoon, and then either that evening or the next morning I was tracking my drums. So what you're hearing on the CDs, the drum parts, were performed, you know, within a 24-hour period of writing the song. So there's not much time for me to digest the compositions before I'm actually tracking. And that being said, I'm surprisingly happy with what I play. You know, you'd think that having to have the pressure of laying them down so soon after writing them, there's not much time for developing, but I could pretty much tell when writing a part, you know, if it's right, if it's wrong, if it's what I want to play. And, you know, for the most part, I would say I'm 95% happy with all the parts I came up with, you know, on the spot with these songs. And a lot of these parts revolve around the drums, in which case, you know, I'm kind of locked into having to play a certain way to go along with these compositions. This ending is, in fact, I remember suggesting this bass line to Tony, this rising bass line, and I remember saying to myself, what the hell am I doing? Telling Tony Levin what to play. But he took the suggestion and went with it. There you go, by accident. Speaking of Tony, Chris and Kevin's Excellent Adventure. This was mine and his duet, and what you're seeing here is the actual footage of this improv. We must have laid down 20 different improvs. And I don't think I had my camera rolling for all of them, so luckily I did have it rolling for this particular take. He's the man. And this stick line is so him. That's so Tony. This kind of evolved from, I think I may even talk about this later, or maybe not, I don't recall, it's been a while. But I had this groove. One morning at Millbrook I was warming up and I stumbled into this little shuffle thing here. And I had Paul Orfino roll tape because I didn't want to forget it. And then Tony and I knew we were going to do some sort of duet, so I busted out this little shuffle groove. And he and I just improvised on the groove parts. And then jammed in between, and then ended up adding a whistling track, which was kind of funny.
This is our vocal piece, you know, we got to establish some sort of hook. We need a radio tune.
Tony's cappuccino maker. Here's the only vocals on both Liquid Tension albums. Anyway, when I think of shuffles, I think of Jeff Porcaro. He was the king of that. And I also think of John Bonham, Fool in the Rain. I think that's the name of the track from the Into the Outdoor album. It's an amazing rock shuffle. But I've never had a chance to really record anything like that on any Dream Theater album. So this was a nice, interesting thing for me to use as a blueprint for a jam. Tony and I actually had something that was going to be on the second LTE album. We were going to have another duet, being that John Jordan had one as well, and it was going to be called Chris and Kevin's Bogus Journey, to keep in spirit of the the Bill and Ted films. But because of time restrictions, we end up not being able to use it. So
one of the most exciting
hopefully someday.
aspects for me about the Liquid Tension experiment was the opportunity to work with the great, legendary Tony Levin on bass and stick. And one of the best memories I have of the first album's session was the duet that he and I did. And we ended up calling it Chris and Kevin's Excellent Adventure for reasons which I won't go into here. But in any case, it was an opportunity for both of us to completely stretch out and improvise. Anyway, so one morning I was fiddling around on the drums, just warming up, and I stumbled upon this pretty cool shuffle groove. And before I had the chance to forget it, I started screaming and yelling into the control room for somebody to roll that. And luckily, I record every session I do. And this was one of those moments where I stumbled into this groove. If I hadn't laid it down on tape, I probably would have forgotten it. It would have never gotten used. Then when the idea came for me and Tony to do a duet, we ended up using this shuffle as the foundation for this little improv thing that he and I did. But anyway, I'd like to break down the Chris and Kevin shuffle groove for you so you could see exactly what I'm doing. The most important element of this groove is the ghost notes. And ghost notes are something that I think are a real important part of playing. For those of you that don't know what a ghost note is, it's when you're actually playing on the snare, but you're not playing a full impact hit. You're actually just sort of tapping lightly in between the twos and the fours or whatever the big hits are. And that's the biggest part of this Chris and Kevin groove. So let me play it for you at normal tempo, and then I'll slow it down, and you could sort of see what it is that I'm doing here. Now slower.
Okay, this footage is from the Roxy, as it says right there. LTE only played 4 shows ever. One in New York City, one in Philly, then one appearance at the NAMM trade show, which was a bit of a disaster, and then this show at the Roxy in LA. And this was the 4th and final show, at least final up to this day. And this is my little kind of drum solo and duet spot with Tony. I'm actually playing with Promark. What the hell are those things called? Oh, tubes. Promark tubes. And you know, you can hear that they give off a very interesting sound, and they're really cool. I'd like to use them on some more things in the future. It's just kind of hard to find places in Dream Theater music for that. But with LTE, it was kind of like anything goes, and a lot of the jams, even a lot of the unreleased jams that we actually recorded, we're utilizing strange sticks and drums and things like that. And Tony's obviously an instigator of that, because he has so many different sound effects, and he'll pull out all these different instruments in the studio. And as I mentioned, we have a lot of jams that still have yet to see the light of day for various reasons, which are kind of strange, but I won't go into that here either. But anyway, I'm hoping that someday they will be released, because there's really some magical stuff, especially between Tony and myself and Jordan. We did a lot of jamming when John had to go home when his daughter Kiara was born. So hopefully one of these days, the Liquid Trio experiment will see the light of day. But anyway, we're just completely improvising here. And also later in this DVD, some of this footage is used for a bonus track, which you can watch. But this was the night after the NAMM appearance. And the NAMM appearance was, it's always hard when you play at a trade show. You know, it's not your show, and there's sound check problems and gear problems. How ironic to have gear problems at the NAMM show when you're surrounded by nothing but gear. And we ended up going on very late, and then we made a couple of mistakes. It was hard to, remember all these parts for these live shows, because we wrote it all so spontaneously in the studio, and then we had to go back and actually try to learn these things. Anyway, Tony now brings in the Chris and Kevin theme, and we go off a little bit on this. But it really, for me, was such an honor to not only record these 2 albums with Tony, but to share the stage with him and play out live, and just to develop a relationship with him. He's somebody I really always admired, and it's great to have a working relationship with him now, and I hope that we could, maybe do some more stuff in the future. Flat note there. You can see my hair is kind of growing back there, only to be chopped again. Oh, here's where I attempt the whistling part. In a joking way. Please don't take my whistling skills so seriously. There's going to be a whole entire thread on my forum about my whistling skills. Oh no, wait a second. I'm not even whistling. That's right. I'm singing it.
Yeah, baby, yeah.
I guess I didn't even attempt to whistle, because trying to project a whistle into a PA at a live concert wouldn't have been that successful. It just sounded like some wind. It's hard enough, I found when we recorded these whistling parts, it's really hard to get a tone out of a whistle when you're whistling into a microphone, because it just picks up the air that you're blowing.
Okay, right now I'm going to play through a couple of sections from a track off the second Liquid Tension album called Another Dimension. And both of these sections are taken from the middle of the song, when we were able to play around with some odd time signatures. So here we go.
Well, as I'm about to break down after this little piece is done, this whole section is incorporating a lot of odd time signatures. In the middle section of Another Dimension, got to fiddle with a lot of metric modulation and 5s and 6s and 7s and things like that. And this is one of my favorite songs. This is, I think, one of the most Dream Theater-esque LTE songs. It's just very heavy, crunchy guitars, lots of odd tones. Reminds me of very much like a Burning My Soul meets Hell's Kitchen, which used to be the same song. Very much in that vein. Another dimension, another dimension. And as I've kind of talked about in various interviews, the title "Another Dimension" came from that rhythm right there. Another dimension. Which I kind of copped from a Beastie Boys song called Intergalactic. They kind of do that, another dimension, another dimension. And when we were writing this song, we had that rhythm, and it seemed to be saying another dimension to us. So that was kind of the working title, and then we ended up really naming it that. Here's where we kind of get into, we start to venture off into some of the more Latin things to come. There's hand clap overdubs there, and timbali overdubs at the same time as well. First LTE album had whistles, second one had hand claps. You're hearing some timbali solos going on top of these different odd tones. There's also a shaker going on, so there's an example of where I had maybe 3 or 4 different overdubs happening beyond just the drums. Now here's a trip into Italy. Jordan playing an accordion solo on the keyboard. A cannoli, anyone? It always bothered me that those Latin percussion heads, one is upside down and one is right side up. Jose, I'm going to have to dock you for that. I don't know why he didn't match those heads to face the same way. John gets his kind of acoustic guitar flamenco vibe going. Very interesting song. I'd like to someday play this again with Dream Theater. Like I said, it seems very up Dream Theater, very much up our alley. All right, so now let's hear the breakdown.
Okay, there's a lot going on there, and it's almost all completely dealing with odd time signatures, which is, to me, the most fascinating part of playing drums. So much of my style is revolved around odd time signatures and numbers and counting and arithmetic and so on. And this is a perfect example of that style of playing. What's going on at the beginning of this section is I'm playing what I call a jungle groove between the toms and the snare, and the patterns are alternating back and forth between 4 and 5, and then every 4th bar, the 5 is actually becoming a 6. So it's being counted as 4 and 5, 4 and 5, 4 and 5, 4 and 6. Let me play the pattern for you, and I'll count it along so you can understand how to count it. 1, 2, 3, 4. So you can see there at the end, all I did was, instead of going a blah-ba-bam on the 5, a triplet on the 5, I went 2 triplets to set up 5 and 6. 5 triplet, 6 triplet, bum. Then, after a full round of jungle grooves going 4, 5, 4, 5, 4, 5, 4, 6, I then translate that groove or that metric modulation to more of a ride groove. And I'm also doing some, I think it would be 30-second note accents along with the guitar. So let me play that for you now in the context of the ride pattern. 1, 2, 3. And like I mentioned, there's a fast 30-second note thing happening with the guitar. Just then, for the sake of breaking down the example, I didn't include it, but now I will include it and play it for you. So let me slow that down. 1, 2, 1, 2. Okay, now I'm going to break down the second piece that I played from Another Dimension. This is very similar to the first piece that I played because it's dealing with a lot of odd time signatures. And what I did was I developed my part the same exact way melodically. What's happening is it's starting with a pattern on the toms, a jungle groove thing, and then it's developing to a ride sort of pattern, and it's very similar in that sense to the previous section, except now this time, instead of counting in 4s and 5s and everything, this is actually dealing with 7s and 4s and 6s. So let me count this out for you. The beginning pattern for this section is actually 7, 4, and 4, and the 7 can be counted as 4 and 3, then 4 and 4. So you can count it 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. That's the first set. So let me play that for you first. 2, 3, 4. Now, if I was to count that, it would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, once you get that first step done, there's actually a second step to that whole process, because what's happening is it's the second part of it is going 7, 4, and 6. And all that means is there's an extra 2 eighth notes at the end. So as before we were going 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Now we're going 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2. Meaning the 4 and the 2 equaling 6. So it's 7, 4, and 6. Basically, it's the exact same pattern, except I'm adding an extra 2 beats at the end. So let me play that for you now. 1, 2, 3, 4. I have to point out here that you can actually hear me humming. It's funny because I never realized I did that until I started singing and playing at the same time and had a microphone on me. If you watch some of these parts back, you can actually hear me go. So when we were recording this, we had to be conscious to, I had to be conscious to not do that. We had to be conscious to kind of bring the mic down at those points.
instruments. But it's kind of funny that I make those noises while I play, and I didn't even know it.
Now, if you put them together without any of the repeats, what you're going to have is 7/4/4, 7/4/6. So now let me play the entire back-to-back groove for you. 1, 2, 3. Now, once again, like the previous section, what I did was I took that same time signature pattern and then developed it onto a ride groove. So what's happening now is you're having the same thing, 7/4/4, 7/4/6, but now it's being played in a more groove type fashion. So here we go. I'm going to play that now for you with the ride pattern. 1, 2.
You know, sometimes our influences come from the strangest places and most obscure bands. This whole section reminds me of it's a song called the La La Song from a band called Zebra. Back in the 80s, they were a very, very popular band on Long Island, and their first album is an absolute classic. And if any of you know that album, there's a thing towards the end of the La La Song where they do these odd times and with this guitar breakdown, and you'll definitely hear the similarities if you check it out. This footage was actually taken backstage at the Roxy. That's a guy named Scott Hansen. That's Setless Scotty that just passed through that door. He's accumulated the choreography on my site. But, anyway, that's coming from the dressing room in the Roxy down to the stage. You can get a little taste of our gear here. And this is an improvised jam. To me, one of the coolest things about LTE are the improv jams. And all four of us just absolutely love improvising. That's why I played such a big part in the LTE albums and tried to incorporate it as much as possible on stage as well. And this was the jam from this particular show, which was decent. And I remember we had a really good jam at the Philly show. If anybody has a bootleg of that show, we're really good at that one. But this was a taste of things to come with Jordan and John trading back and forth. You know, actually these LTE shows we did was the same month that we made the change in Dream Theater and brought Jordan and the band into the band. So as we were playing these shows, Jordan was officially a new member of Dream Theater, but we had yet to write or record anything with him in the band. But, you know, looking at these exchanges, we knew it would be pretty magical. We knew that the three of us had a great writing chemistry. And I often get asked about why we won't do any more future LTE albums, or at least why I have no desire to do any at this particular point in my life. At the time when I put this project together, I wanted an outside writing environment from Dream Theater. And now that Jordan is in Dream Theater, you know, the three of us have this great writing chemistry, and the two of them have a great, you know, lead playing chemistry. We would rather take that chemistry and focus it into our full-time gig, you know? And of course I really love LTE, and there was some great stuff here, and I love being able to write instrumental music with these guys. And of course working with Tony was amazing. But at this stage in Dream Theater's career, I think it's more important to take that focus and utilize it in Dream Theater now that he is a part. And it's so similar, you know, it's like it would no longer be an outside project. It would just be working with a different bass player and without a singer. And to me, it's a little too close, you know, it doesn't serve the same purpose anymore. But I have many fond memories of this stuff, and this music ends up being incredibly relevant to the Dream Theater history. This is the last song we wrote in the first LTE sessions, and it's the last composition on the album before the improv. And a lot of good collaboration on this song. You know, Paradigm Shifts was more guitar driven, Kindred Spirits was more piano driven. The beginning of Freedom of Speech was more piano driven, but Universal Mind had a little bit of everything. You know, the first half was very guitar driven, but then this whole bit that we're working on here stemmed from Jordan's solo, I believe. You know, he does this piano solo in the middle, which kind of sets up this last part, and then Tony and I kind of took this part and developed it into something different. And this might be my favorite song on the first album. At least the second half of this song is really cool. But you're actually watching us compose it. I have a lot more of this footage. Maybe we'll put some of it onto this DVD. John's still holding that note somewhere here in New York.
Okay, now I'm going to play for you a chunk from Universal Mind, which was from the first Liquid Tension album. And I would like to just start off, before I get into the entire piece, I would like to start off showing the pattern that I'm playing to begin this section. And this follows a piano solo by Jordan Rudess, and then myself and Tony Levin come in with this pattern, which is in 7, 8, 7, and 7, and that's the way it's phrased the whole way through. So it almost feels like it's in 7 the whole time, except for the second bar we're slipping in an extra 8th note. So let me break that down now for you slowly. Slow it down for you now. 1, 2, 3, 4. The way that would be counted is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, now after playing that pattern through with Tony 4 times, then I did my usual development, which means, you know, take the pattern and take it to the next stage musically. Sometimes I do that in terms of numbers and breaking up the time signatures differently, or sometimes I just do that in terms of the instrumentation or orchestration with the drums and cymbals. In this case, it was the orchestration. So what I did was I took that pattern and then developed it more to a China sort of thing. Very similar to what I did earlier in When the Water Breaks. So let me play that now for you in the developed stage. 1, 2, 3, 4. So now that you know the intro and understand, hopefully, how I started this bit off, now you can actually see it in the context of the music, and we'll take it from this point and take it up straight to the end. So here we go, Universal Mind.
This part always reminded me of something off of one of the early Bill Bruford solo albums, which were amazing albums, by the way. Bill Bruford and Jeff Berlin on bass, Alan Holdsworth on guitar. Check those out if you haven't heard them. But and of course, Bill has a long history with Tony, so you know, I just felt like I was kind of in Bill and Tony land during this section. Some of the phrasings and the kind of groove that's going on here. But anyway, as I said earlier, I really like this part of this song. A lot of odd time signatures, and A lot of this stemmed from Jordan, but this is a case where Jordan had maybe some riffs or some parts, but the orchestration underneath it, you know, we worked on together and collaborated on the way that these parts kind of were phrased and developed, and the different time signatures, which of course is something that is such a big part of my style, you know, combining all different numbers and time signatures. And if you've ever been to any of my clinics, I spend a lot of time talking about that and dissecting that. Here you can feel some of the different phrasing. It's a lot of the same parts over and over, but the way that the drums are phrased, they're stating them differently each time. And there's a theme from the piano solo that was in the middle of the song. And then we're approaching the finale here. As I said earlier, it was a real challenge writing this stuff in the studio and then immediately doing my drums. But I so enjoyed the process that every album I've done since the first LTE album has been done this way. This was my first time doing it that way, as it was for John. Oh, all of us probably, but since then, you know, we did the second LTE album the same way. Then we enjoyed that experience so much. We did the last Dream Theater album, Seems from Memory, that way, and the latest Dream Theater album that we're finishing up right now is being done that way, and then the 2 Transatlantic albums I did. So the last 6 albums I've done were written in the studio. And you know what? It's good for a drummer like me because I get bored pretty easily, and there's nothing I hate more than practicing a song 100 times to the walls of a rehearsal room. And then maybe that's horrible to admit, but really, you know, I feel like if I'm playing and I'm doing something, I want it to get documented. You know, I get the ideas, they're fresh, the inspiration is there. I want to document it. I want to roll tape, or if it's live, I want to be playing it in front of somebody. And here's what we're gonna do. This is like a reggae version of Heart and Soul. This stuff is totally Jordan's sense of humor, especially this bit coming up here. And we even did a bit of this kind of thing in The Dance of Eternity by Dream Theater. But it's so Jordan. He's constantly just playing very funny things in the studio, and every once in a while we'll get to incorporate them into a song. And I think it really worked right there.
Well, the future of LTE. It's kind of hard to say where the band will go from this point, because Liquid Tension originally started as the opportunity for myself and John to have an outside environment from Dream Theater. And as you know, Jordan Rudess, as a result of the 2 Liquid Tension albums, has since joined Dream Theater full-time. So, you know, 3/4 of Liquid Tension is now 3/5 of Dream Theater. So I really don't see the purpose of making any future studio albums with Liquid Tension, because we already have this writing chemistry.
Magna Carta is cringing
now, working
right now.
full-time in Dream Theater. However, we will always be open and excited about the idea of ever doing live shows. So there are always possibilities.
You hear that, promoters
of
across the
live
world?
shows with Liquid
Give
Tension
us the
in future,
invitation.
so that would never be counted out. In the meantime, because I no longer have this outside writing environment with Liquid Tension, I've assembled yet another side project, and this is one that I worked on this past summer of '99. It'll be coming out in the winter of 2000. Wow, that's wild. But in any case, this is more of a prog rock type supergroup, and basically I assembled some musicians from other newer progressive bands, musicians who I really admire, even more for their writing talents, more than their playing technical abilities. But in any case, this project has Pete Travis on bass, who is the bass player from Marillion, one of the most melodic bass players I've ever heard. Neil Morse, who is the main writing force and singer and keyboard player for Spock's Beard, and Roine Stolt, who is the guitar player and vocalist and main writing force behind the Swedish band The Flower Kings. And the 4 of us assembled once again at Millbrook for a 10-day period and created an album very much like Liquid Tension in terms of the way it was created, but musically it's very, very different. It's very, very long songs. We have a 30-minute composition on there, and it's very much in the old school vein of Yes and Pink Floyd and the Beatles. All four of us are singing, and it gave me a chance to really lay back and do my best Ringo or John Bonham impersonation, which was fun for a change. So that's Liquid Tension's future. That's the future of my latest side project as well. And as far as the future for Dream Theater, as you know, we have a brand new album out, Metropolis 2, Scenes from a Memory. And in case you don't know, see the second video as part of this set, which will focus on all of Dream Theater's music for our latest album, and will give you a glimpse of where we are going in the future. So I hope to see you in that video. Thanks for checking this one out, and see you soon.
Well, here we are 90 minutes later, getting to finish Acid Rain. So you heard it from the top, and now you heard the ending. I chose to use this as bookends for the video because I don't think there was so much technique to talk about with this particular song. As I mentioned at the beginning of this, it was just very high energy, a lot of double bass, but not much that I could break down that I knew I wanted to include in the video. So anyway, that's this video. It was fun watching it. Reminded me of how much I love this music. Now, where else could you find a Tony Levin cappuccino making lesson on an instructional video? Maybe this is why it won Modern Drummer magazine's best instructional video of the year. I think it had nothing to do with me. It had completely to do with Tony's cappuccino lesson here.
The heavens brewing.
That's the sound of Super Wonder brew being made. Keep us going for a little while.
Jose and McGee, the two techs. Thanks to all the great musicians included on this video.
Yeah, you're getting this, huh?
E.T., rest in peace. That's my cat that passed away since making this video. Wait a second. Is this the bonus track? Even the videos come with bonus tracks. We don't only give them on the DVD, we even gave them on the video. So this was a spontaneous solo, as all of mine are, from a drum clinic I did in, what did it say, Dallas? I wasn't paying attention. You can even see the tags on the hardware. You know, when I do these drum clinics, the retailers supply me with drums. You know, basically they get an equipment list from Tama or Sabian, and then they usually supply the kit, and then it's either sold or just put back on the walls. And so you can see the tags hanging off the cymbal stands there. But anyway, I always do allow people to come videotape my clinics. And one of the things that I usually ask is, if possible, to please just get me a copy afterwards. And here's a case where a fan filmed it. And by the way, I don't know your name, so whoever you are that filmed this, thank you very much, and I wish I could have included your name. Please don't sue me for using this footage, but then again, I let you film it, so we're even. But anyway, I guess every once in a while I'll pop them in to see how I sounded, to see if I did okay. And a lot of times I end up feeling a little embarrassed. I have trouble watching myself drum solo. I don't consider myself a great soloist, actually. I consider myself more of a creative mind behind the making of music, but not necessarily a soloist. However, I guess when you're doing a drum clinic or releasing a drum video, you have to include the drum solo. So here it is. But anyway, so I will occasionally go back and watch these videos that the fans film and give to me, and I wanted a solo. Like I said, I guess because it was a drum video, you had to have a drum solo, but I didn't want to film one at Millbrook. So I checked out a couple of the tapes I had from clinics, and this solo seemed to have a lot of energy. You know, it looks like I was doing a few different things here of interest, so decided to tag this on at the end of the video. I gotta say, I'm not a drum solo fan. That sounds strange coming from a drummer. And I really enjoyed not doing a drum solo on the last Dream Theater tour. I just felt the reason I didn't do it on the last tour is because it became so expected, and I never want a Dream Theater show to be predictable. And it became very predictable. But, here's the drum solo. Mike Portnoy's going to do a drum solo. And I wanted to get away from that. And I've always done them in the past, and I felt like, okay, I don't want to do the same set list every year. I would never want to keep playing the same songs. So, why should it be any different for a solo? And of course you could say, well, you could do different solos, yes. But I just needed to get away from it for a little while. Maybe I'll bring it back next tour. But I also felt the Metropolis tour was, when it came to solos, I felt Jordan should get the spotlight. It was his first time with us, and he's just an incredible soloist. So figured give him the time. I would have rather I'd take my 6 to 8 or 10 minutes of soloing, and I'd rather play a different song instead. I will say though, when I do solo, I don't know what the hell I'm going to be playing. It's kind of it's spontaneous bursts of energy. And this is a good solo. Now that I'm watching it, I think there's some stuff going on here. Some of them are my typical moves, like that one. Oh, thank you very much. But there are some other things going on here that came out spontaneously, and I don't know where they come from, and I don't even know if I'd be able to reproduce them. That's why when I watch these tapes back sometimes, I'm like, whoa, where'd that come from? I've never played that before. I don't know if I'll ever play it again, so I'm thinking of someday maybe taking some of this footage I have of these different solos, and if there's enough diversity between them all, maybe compiling a video or a DVD that I can offer on my site, perhaps, of different drum solos through the years, from clinics or from shows. There you can see I'm playing with ProMark hot rods, which I use a lot actually. Both LTE albums and both Transatlantic albums, and a lot of Dream Theater stuff as well. They're really great for playing quieter stuff, which of course I'm not doing right here. But when you're playing in the context of a song and you want to play dynamic, they're really great tools. Oh, that was nice. I needed some applause there for the stick changeover. Where were you guys? This is obviously before the Max stacks and splashes were around, because I can see that those aren't Max cymbals. I don't mind playing different drums and different setups at clinics either. I like with Dream Theater having a consistent setup, and I pay a lot of attention to the drums and cymbals I'm using. But when I'm doing clinics, caught my ear for a minute. Almost sounds like a groove from the old Majesty demo, a song called Too Far. See, that's just kind of spontaneously came out. Anyway, I don't mind at clinics experimenting with different gear. So a lot of times if they haven't followed the rider to the exact specifications, I'm totally cool with it. I'm totally cool with trying different cymbals and different drum configurations, It's a nice opportunity to kind of experiment. The end. See you in the next volume. Thanks for hanging with me this long.